It's no secret that writing can be lonely work, but does it really have to be? Whether you're full-time, part-time, or just starting out, you'll get insights into the tricks, tips, and production habits of writers from every level of the biz. From best-selling authors to those launching their first novels, you're sure to be in the company of friends as we encourage great writers to divulge and share their secrets. This is the Great Writers Share podcast with your host, best-selling author, Daniel Wilcox.
Hello and welcome to the Great Writers Share podcast with me, Daniel Wilcox, where every week I invite some of the friendliest and most hardworking writers around today to join me on the show and discuss everything that makes them tick, roar and bounce. Today's date is 31st of October. It is Halloween, and it kind of ties in nicely because I've got a bit of a sore throat thing going on, so I'm not sure if I'm going to lend my talents to maybe doing some voiceover for some horror stuff. We'll see. It's right down my alley, so we can enjoy that. But today I am talking to the wonderful Sacha Black, who is someone who I met again at the 20 Books Edinburgh conference. For those who have been listening to the show since it started, a lot of my guests have come from there, but I guess that's just a testament to how useful it is to go to these kinds of conferences. And she's not... We didn't get the chance to speak fully at the conference itself, and we've since been put in touch and we've had a lot of talks and we've had a lot of discussions, and I actually appeared on her podcast about a month or so ago, a few weeks ago, the Rebel Author podcast, which was a really, really good experience. It was a chance for someone else to probe me for a change, which was quite nice. But so enjoyed that. So Sacha is very, very successful in the non-fiction world. She is a fantastic speaker. She has a series of her own in the fiction world. She sort of writes YA fantasy type stuff, and it's all wonderful stuff to read. And yeah, we go into a lot of stuff in today's interview. We dive into things like fear setting and Sacha's relationship with fear and how she kind of navigates things, and a lot about how you have to get out of your own way in order to progress and develop. We go into being a rebel. She runs a Rebel Author podcast, and she goes a lot into sort of how different elements of her life she's become a rebel. She's gone against the grain and how that's helped her to get to where she is now. And we go a little bit into her writing process as well, which is quite interesting because I've been watching her for a while on Instagram, and she regularly features updates about how her books are going, how she plans her chapters, adding bits, removing bits, and I had the chance to break down some of those images and go into a bit more detail about everything that was going on. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up for this one, so stick around. But before we go into the main interview, I want to remind everyone that over at www.patreon.com/Great Writers Share, you can get much more from the show. The Patreon page actually supports a lot of the efforts that go into the show. It helps pay for hosting, transcription, everything else that goes into producing a podcast, and we've got a growing audience base over there, which is quite nice. We've got lots of people jumping into Slack group, and we do have a new patron this week, which is the wonderful Mark McClure, who I will also apologise to publicly on air for an automation sequence that actually got his name wrong when I introduced him into the Patreon group. So sorry, Mark, I know what your name really is, and I hope we can move forward from there. But that does also mean that Mark gets entered into this month's monthly giveaway, in which we're giving away a copy of Libby Hawker's Take Off Your Pants. And I'm going to click a random number generator here and assign it to a person. And the winner of this month's giveaway is Harley Christensen. So congratulations, Harley. I'll be getting in contact to make sure that book makes its way over to you. And next week in the show, I will be announcing the new book that we'll be giving away, because we are currently going to be running a poll and doing a bit of a vote over what book is put up for grabs. So if you want to get involved in that, just jump over to patreon.com/Great Writers Share, and you can get involved for as little as $1 a month. And now, without any further ado, I'm going to jump straight into the interview with the one and the only Sacha Black. Sacha Black has 5 obsessions: words, expensive shoes, conspiracy theories, self-improvement, and breaking the rules. She is the host of the brand new Rebel Author podcast and writes books about people with magical powers and other books about the art of writing. This year, Sacha also began editing the advice blog and managing the self-publishing advice conference for the Alliance of Independent Authors. When Sacha's not writing, she can be found laughing inappropriately loud, blogging, sniffing musty old books, fangirling film and TV soundtracks, or thinking up new ways to break the rules. Sacha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really weird hearing somebody else say that, because I was nodding along the whole time. So I'm like, oh, that's really me. That is me. Yeah.
Yeah, right down to it. It's like he's sitting next to me. He's in my mind and he just knows me.
Exactly.
But the thing is, reading that intro, I mean, the second part where you're talking about the blogging, the sniffing musty old books, I literally bought a book that came through yesterday, which I think was originally published in 1998, and I bought it second hand. And the first thing I did was open up those yellow pages and just have like a big sniff. And it's nice when other people admit that they do it, because I then don't feel so weird. But what is it for you about that smell that...
Childhood. So I have a very strange childhood, and part of it, I lived in a mansion that was owned by my great, possibly 3 greats, possibly 2 greats, I don't know, one of my aunts anyway. And she had, like, Beauty and the Beast and the library. She literally had one of those. And she also had one of these corridors that had, at the time, they were like up to my neck, sized books with loads of old maps and sort of scriptures and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and so the whole of my childhood just smells of musty old books. So
Amazing.
Yeah, that's why I love it. Yeah.
That's incredible. So how old were you when you were living there? How long did you live there for?
I lived there twice. Once, I think, was probably 6 months, and the other time was closer to a couple of years.
Wow. And do you think that's where your love of books birthed from, or was it before then that you were...
Whoa, that is a good question. No, I think it comes from long before that. My mum always read to me. And when I was a kid, I literally read so much that we had to move libraries. We only had like a really small local library. So we literally had to move libraries because I'd read everything in the children's section, and I'd also read pretty much everything on the mobile library as well. So we had one of the mobile libraries. So we had to go to like the next town to go to a bigger library. If I'd been more self-aware, I probably would have realized that I wanted to be a writer long before I actually realized I wanted to be a writer. But no, yes, I was a prolific reader as a child, and I wrote stories as well. I was that geek who would rather go to the library at lunch and write a story.
But that kind of thing seems to serve people well, particularly when you get to this point, because I think, particularly growing up, for me anyway, and obviously I can't speak for everyone because we've all had different experiences, but I know that I was one of those people that I felt comfortable in a library, but I didn't actually spend that much time in a library because of whatever stigma was around being some kind of geek, being some kind of nerd, not going out and playing outside with your friends and all that kind of stuff. But I think there is something to be said about actually spending your time and indulging yourself in that stuff that does make you happy. I mean, has that been something that you've always just gone for? Have you always just kind of followed what it is that your heart wants? Yeah,
pretty much. But I've always been a bit of a rebel, but also I just, am I allowed to say naughty words? Or?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, basically I didn't really give a fuck at school.
I like that was followed by I'm a bit of a rebel.
Yeah, I know, but you never know if someone's got explicit lyrics or whatever.
You're fine.
Otherwise I'll censor myself. No. So when I was quite a bit of a loner at school, really, and so when you're bullied for most of your school life, you just end up not really giving a fuck. So I happily indulged and binge read, and I had insomnia as a teenager as well, so I would be reading until like 4 o'clock in the morning. Nobody really knows if that was just because the books were awesome or just because of the insomnia, but yeah, so I've always indulged in books and the cinema and any form of storytelling I can possibly get my hands on. I will indulge. In fact, the year before my son was born, I had one of those unlimited card jobby whatsits that you can get in the UK. So for anybody who's not in the UK, we have the chance to pay a monthly subscription. You can go to the cinema as many times as you want. I shit you not, I went 45 times the year before my son was born. Literally 45 times. I only left twice as well. So that's quite impressive.
That's impressive, because I remember a week where I tried to go to cinema a lot and I just ran out of films very quickly because there wasn't that much on show.
Yeah.
So 45 times is impressive.
Well, it more or less became our weekly date night.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So at what point did that turn into writing? You say that you were around the time you were at school anyway, you were sort of dabbling in stories, writing and playing with words. So at what point did that start to turn into something a bit more serious, a point where you thought, okay, I can start to do something with this?
So I left university and knowing that I had to get a proper job. So I went and got a proper job, and I got onto one of these delightfully dull management fast track, fucking things. And within about 5 minutes of being there, I was like, wow, I really don't want to do this. But it was too late. And, one gets money, and money is nice. So I stayed. But I needed somewhere to vent and to rant. So I started blogging anonymously, which is where my name comes from. And yeah, the blogging turned into writing. It was more the writing that I was enjoying, and then I sort of fell into flash fiction communities in the blogs, and all of a sudden I was ferreting. I made my wife go in the loft, get down like all my old storybooks, and it was near a nano as well. I remember that, and I was like, right, well, I'm going to do it. And yeah, I started a nano and got 52k, I think, in the first nano. And wow. I never, ever looked back. It was all a pile of shit, and I had to rewrite it twice from scratch, but that's not the point. I formed the writing habit at that point, and then I just didn't look back. I carried on blogging. I shared all of the lessons that I was learning along the way, which other people happened to find useful, which was great. And that's how I ended up writing the nonfiction. So I blame Nano, basically.
I think Nano has started a lot of people's careers. I think it's something that can either make or break you, and if it breaks you, you'll be back the next year to try it again because there's something addictive about it. Because I failed my first two.
Did you?
I did.
I've never won one since.
No?
No.
Oh man, maybe this year.
Yeah,
what is it?
I am doing
4 days away. Are you?
Yeah, I am.
Got it all planned out, ready to go. Ish. Okay, so I'm gonna take this on a very selfish route, because I'm very, very interested in blogging at the minute, and obviously you've been blogging for how many years now?
7 or 8.
7 or 8 years. So at the beginning of a blogger's journey, and essentially there might be some listeners out there that are thinking of going down the blogging route, and I know that there's a use to blogging in that it can keep you accountable. It's really good at, like you say, sharing your journey and sharing things you're doing. It's a good way to also, I guess, process what you're learning along the way. How did you begin that blogging journey? Because one of the things that I've seen personally and with other people is the most difficult thing to do is knowing what to write about and how to thread that across to information that's put out regularly. How did you start your journey?
Well, I was a selfish cow, and I did it because I was senile. Like, literally, I cannot be any more honest than that. I have a very poor short-term memory, and combine that with a complete obsession for learning the writing craft, and you have a problem. So I was like, how do I remember all of this stuff that I'm learning? So I literally wrote down the things that I was learning. And it just so happened that other people found that useful. So that is how when I started my blog, it went through 2 iterations before it got to where it was or where it is now. So I ranted about work and very quickly stopped doing that because I realized what I was doing and the dangers that somebody could find out. And then we had some fertility problems, and it sort of became a bit of a fertility blog. And then when I got pregnant, I then was like, no, I'm going to be the person that I want my son to see, I suppose. I want to show him that anything is possible. And that really narrowed my focus and vision. So I got rid of everything else and started again, essentially. And genuinely, like, I am joking a little bit, but also I am genuinely senile, and I really did need somewhere to put the lessons. And so, so the way that I came up, I guess I think you're asking about content and how you kind of find your audience or whatever. So every time I read a book, I was going to show you one of my books, but every time I read a book, I have sticky notes and a pencil. And every time, I know that's sacrilege to somebody who's listening, going, she marks a book. Yes, Yes, I do. And every time I either see, I don't know, perhaps a wonderful piece of dialogue, or I see some beautiful prose, or I see something that's a really good characterization, I'll pencil mark it and I'll stick a sticky tab in. At the end, I would collate all of those, and I started out handwriting them up and then stopped that because that took forever. Yes. So I would then type them up, and I would then chunk them. So I'd be like, okay, well, this book has got, say, 15 quotes about characterization and only 2 about description. So this author must be really good at characterization. So then I'd go through and I would like deconstruct them to a forensic level. Well, is it something about the grammar? Is it something about the word choice? Is it verbs? Is it the flow of the sentence? And I would just really get down to the detail of what it was that they'd done. And once I'd made my conclusions, I'd then write it up, because otherwise I wouldn't remember it. Yeah, and so that is how I got started. Does that answer your question? I don't know.
No, absolutely. I mean, it raises a lot more questions, which is good, because it means we've got more to talk about. But what, I guess from that, one question that I do want to ask is why? Why would you drill? I mean, obviously, I'm very, very similar. And you mentioned people that think it's sacrilege to write on books. I am one of those people who thinks that. But my mind is changing, because I've got a shelf full of pristine books that I won't crack the spine. It terrifies me. I love books to be in good condition. But I'm now getting to the point where I've read a lot of books, but I know that I've seen certain passages. I know that I've seen certain things where I've stopped mid-book and gone, this is absolutely beautiful. I know there was one recently I read in Adam Neville's The Ritual, which was absolutely gorgeous. And I know what that is because it's an entire chapter. But to be able to stop and then pencil all those down and start to deconstruct everything, what was it that made you want to go into that level of working it all out?
Wanting to be a better writer. I want to be the best possible writer I can be. I don't I like to be the best at whatever I'm doing. God, you told me you'd get to the core of me. You really are. It's so embarrassing. No, I'm not ashamed. I do. I want to be the best writer I possibly can be. And the only way to do that is to learn as much as possible. And yes, you can go and you can read lots of craft books. And I do. And I love craft books. But also the other part of you has to see it in practice. And so how one writer can use one technique might be completely different to the way another writer uses a technique. And that's really what I was looking for. What techniques are they using? I don't want to mimic their style. I want to steal their technique. What is it? What are they doing with the placement of words, or the grammar, or the juxtapositions, or the alliteration, or whatever it is? So for me, it was more about understanding the different ways you could pull out techniques, and then comparing those against other writers. So sometimes a blog post would include quotes from 4 different books where I'd seen, similar techniques or whatever. Also, I don't crack my book spines because I think that is sacrilege. So I'm a total hypocrite. But yeah, I will happily mark my book with pencil, but God forbid I crack the spine.
It hurts. It genuinely hurts.
Yeah, it does hurt. My wife as well, when we go on holiday, she will usually read 1 or 2 books, and she will literally bend the spine. She comes back and there are pages falling out of these books, and I'm like weeping and like shaking in the corner because the books are ruined. But yeah, anyway, tangent, sorry.
No, I had a friend recently who asked to borrow my copy of It by Stephen King, and obviously this is like a 700-800 page book, and he doesn't really read that often. And I said to him, I'm fine with you borrowing it, but literally, if you crack the spine, he just said no and bought his own version.
Yeah.
And inside, I'm going, thank fuck for that.
Yeah.
But I mean, essentially, what I'm hearing about the whole blogging journey from yourself, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, is that you went out onto this venture with a very, very selfish cause, which isn't a bad thing, but it was very much a case of, I want to find a way to remember everything I'm doing. I want to find a way to work my practice, and then other people just happen to kind of gravitate towards that journey. Is that the same with blogging?
I would say, yeah, and like, I'm not going to apologize for that either, because I stopped blogging for a while because suddenly it became about other people, and I just lost all my love for it because I felt so much pressure to give people what they wanted. And actually, like, I know that we have readers and we have to give them what they want, but the minute you start writing something for other people, it can apply all this kind of crazy pressure on you, and you fall out of love with it. So I now the way that I see it is that I write the blog posts that I want to write, but I bear in mind the reader. So I try to make them as useful as possible. So I'll always include all of the lessons that I have learned in order to help other people not make the mistakes that I've made. And so, yes, it helps other people. And I do try to help other people, but I have to drive the content from me.
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. And I don't blame you at all. You don't need to apologize for any of that. Because I think part of what I look at when because I've tried blogging a couple of times. I've sort of gone into it for a couple of months and then just fallen out. And I think what I'm probably doing is trying too much to look at which readers I'm trying to please as opposed to the content I want to write. And I'm very much in a different position now where I am looking at the content that I want to write, and it's probably going to be short fiction, potentially putting up and working around that angle, because I prefer writing the fiction to the non-fiction. But we'll see when it comes to it. But I think it's definitely it comes across as more honest, and people, particularly nowadays online, seem to gravitate a lot more towards honesty. And we had Rachel Herron on the podcast last week talking about her adventure with sort of knitting blogs and everything else, and how people have gravitated towards her journey. I think that's just something that is trending a lot more, and people seem to like that authenticity in people rather than people who are pretending to be 1,000 things that they're not, just for the sake of it and then getting found out down the line.
Exactly. And actually, it's funny you say that, because I at one point changed my voice, because so I am very sweary naturally, and I like to make up swear words as well, but I got quite a lot of shitty, snarky comments about my voice. So for a while I bent it and tried to swear less, and I hated it. And so I just, it was a journey of, self-realization that actually, well, fuck it. If you don't like it, don't fucking read it,
Yes, there'll always be another reader.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. If you do the thing that you love with enough passion, enough enthusiasm, other people who love that thing as much as you will find you, because you gravitate towards to the people who have those shared interests. So, yeah.
So now you have to give us one of your made up swear words.
Oh my God. No, I can't. Hang on a minute. You'll have to edit this. Sorry. They are also.
You can't just say something like that and then not continue that.
Oh no, this is so awkwardly embarrassing. We might have to come back to this. I'll
okay. While you search, I'll throw another question at you and see if you can juggle this. Why do you feel like you need to swear so much? And I'm not saying either way. I swear a lot, but I'm just curious as to whether or not you've got a particular reason why.
I don't feel like I have to swear. I just have a potty mouth. Maybe because I wasn't allowed to swear as a teenager. So like my mum wouldn't let me get my hair cut either, so I cut it all off when I went to university, and I've never grown it back. If somebody tells me not to do something, I more or less always go and do the opposite. Somebody told me I wasn't dressing corporately enough, so I turned up in leggings and trainers and to work, and literally never ever wore corporate clothes again. So I don't know, and now it's one of these things that's ingrained. I mean, how long have we been talking? What, 15 minutes, and I've only dropped 4 F-bombs? I mean, that's
impressive. Yeah,
it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm literally.
You don't have to find that one. If you want to, you could always drop one into show notes. I'll just add it as an extra into the notes afterwards.
Yeah, okay.
But speaking of this rebellious streak, tell me a little bit about the Rebel Author podcast, how it's going so far, why you started it, and a little bit about what the show is all about.
So the show is a motivational podcast for all of the creatives out there with a little bit of an inner rebel. I started it because lots of people told me I should have one because they like listening to me. Why? I have no idea. But I have a good audio voice. I am recording my own audiobooks as well. And I think it's probably because when I was a teenager, I did voiceover work. So apart from all the I'm now saying, awkward because I'm embarrassed now. But yeah, I had lots of compliments. Some very lovely people told me I had a great audio voice. What they're saying about my face, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, and fear stopped me for a long time. Not wanting to do it because it's the thing to do stopped me for a long time. But I have listened to podcasts for probably 6 years, I would say, and obsessively. And the last 2 years in my job, I would quite literally have headphones in for all 8 of those hours, and I would be binge listening to either podcasts or audiobooks. So why on earth wouldn't I? I absolutely love podcasts. So of course, like writing, eventually you cannot not do the thing that's calling to you, I suppose. And also, now I work for myself full time. It's a great way to still see people. Otherwise, you can be in your cave for a whole week and not speak to a human.
Hence the origin of this show.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, so many reasons. I learn from it. I meet amazing people. I get to see and talk to people. And practice for my audiobooks, I suppose.
Nice. And how are you finding the show going so far? Because it's been live for, I want to say 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
I think it's been live probably for about 5 weeks. Yeah, good. I would love to take it weekly. But
it's a commitment.
Whoa, it's a real commitment. Yeah. I think for each episode, if I'm being realistic, it's 1 working day. So, when you think about all the editing and the intro and, yes, okay, I've pre-recorded outros and intros, but you do an intro to your show, and there's it goes on YouTube, it goes on your blog, it goes on Patreon, it goes on excuse me, all of these places and all of the social media and the transcripts, and by the time you finish fannying around with all of that, it really is a whole working day. So until I can get a VA or something, I'm not sure if I can or if I publish some more books, maybe then I'll be able to do it.
And having been someone that's been on the show as well, not that I'm trying to self-plug, but, we did have a conversation for your podcast. It was a different experience to how I go about setting up my podcast. Just in, like you said earlier, everything that you do, you want to do to the best of your ability. And there was every level of it was professional from the beginning to the end, from sending over the emails with the promotion, from getting it booked in. I mean, this show itself, and part of the reason I keep this weekly is because I set it up in a way in which I've built it to be quite quick and as less labor as I can put into it. Not to, for anyone listening, not that I don't put effort into this podcast, because I do, but I have tried to do it in a way in which I can balance that around my writing as well. It doesn't take up too much time. But like you say, you seem to be someone who, it has to be absolutely beautiful, perfect, everything you want it to be. And why shouldn't it be, particularly if that's the kind of stuff that you want to put out that reflects your name on it? And yeah, I think having listened to the podcast, having been on it, it's definitely something that I'd be proud of if I produced it. But making it a weekly might be quite a challenge.
You're going to chip some coal off of my dead heart. You're ruining my reputation.
Rebel.
Yes. I'm fine. It's fine.
But have you got so when you started the podcast, have you got any sort of long-term goal with it? Do you ever look sort of far ahead into the future when you start these things, or is it normally, as it is normally with me, just an impulse? I want to do this and then see where it goes.
No, I would say probably for a year I knew that I wanted to do it. I'd procrastinated for about a year. Where do I want it to go? I would just love it to be, I don't know, I just want it to be part of what I do and who I am. And like I say, I already know I want it to go weekly. And I think also because I do want to speak, I think it will help. Selfishly, I think it will help, because you're creating a body of work where you are talking. Also, I think it, again, selfishly, it helps with research because you talk to interesting people and you find out interesting things. Where would I like it to be? Oh, I'd love to have some big downloads every month. Yeah, I also, the other thing is that it was a bit about me getting over fear, because and this, I'm stalling with the audiobooks because I'm afraid. So I recorded all bar the last session with somebody, and unfortunately their house got burgled and I lost everything. So I would have had an audiobook out this fall. So now my control freak, perfectionist nature can't go with anybody else again, and I have to do it. But that means I'm also stalling because scary. So yeah, no, for me it was I like to always be outside of my comfort zone, because I don't think you are learning and growing and developing unless you're outside of your comfort zone. So a little bit was about me pushing myself to do it. But yeah, I would like to look back in 10, 20, 30 years and still see this podcast going, whether it's in this form or another form. I love podcasts and audio, therefore I want to continue doing it, if that makes sense. But yeah, oh God knows, let's, what in terms of tangibles, I don't know, some ridiculously high download number, that would be well.
That'd be wonderful. And
yeah.
I have to say on my part as well, I wasn't ever really into the podcast world until, I mean, to be fair, it's been a few years now, but like 4 or 5 years ago, I got introduced to it by a friend. I started listening to the self-publishing podcast and all of those guys and going down that route. And it wasn't until we launched the other stories of the podcast and then the Story Studios podcast, which came out a few months later with myself and Luke Condor, which most of the best things that have happened in my writing career have happened because of podcasting. And it definitely wasn't something that I was expecting, just in terms of meeting people, just in terms of the learning a lot from the production value behind it and everything else. And I think, like you rightly have, you started a podcast. I think pretty much everyone should at least give podcasting a go, appear on a podcast, listen to it. Just, I think there's a lot of value to it. But you did mention a couple of times throughout this interview that you have a bit of a relationship with fear, which I'm quite interested about, because you seem very hyper aware of your fears and the things that are stopping you. How do you approach a relationship with fear, and how do you conquer the things that are in your way?
That's really interesting, because I always think that I'm really unself-aware. So I find that fascinating. And I'm going to pick your brains about that. No. Sorry, what was the question?
So what is your relationship with fear? How do you view fear? And then how do you actually overcome obstacles to get to the other side?
Okay, so you know how we said that I was a rebel? Well, I will not even let myself stand in my own way. It is a gift and a curse. I mean, I mean that so deadly seriously. I absolutely refuse to allow myself to stand in my way. I cannot explain it to you. It's this driving, obsessive nature to, as soon as I know that I'm afraid of a thing, that I will do it. It might take me a couple of weeks, a couple of months, but you can be assured that thing is going to fucking happen. So, and I might only do it once as well. So, like, for example, my wife wants to jump out of a plane. Why? I have no idea. But she wanted to go to this bloody, like, indoor thingy in Milton Keynes. Yeah, and I was like shitting myself, if we're being perfectly honest. I did not want to do indoor skydiving at all, but I did it, and I was so good at it as well. I think it's because I'm heavy and like quite strong, so I was able to like do the manoeuvring. Look at me, nobody can see me. For instance, I am manoeuvring live on the podcast. And so whatever it is that I'm scared of, I will force myself to do it, because I don't know, because I'm sick in the head, maybe. And I like the adrenaline. No, I don't know. Yeah, my relationship with fear, it's weird.
I mean, have you, in any way, is it because you've got almost like an experience of overcoming fear and seeing what is good on the other side, and so there is like a deterministic part of you that is like, no, I'm not going to let myself stop myself again? Because I completely get where you're coming from. I've had experiences where I've been the same, and there's something big that I'm not going to discuss yet because I still need to work at it, but there's something huge that I'm looking at doing next year that at the minute it's scaring the crap out of me, which makes me know that it's something that I want to do.
Exactly. So I listen and read loads of self-help mindset stuff, and yes, there is always something good on the other side of fear. In fact, everything is on the other side of fear. But I think it's more that I have a very clear vision of where I want to be. And once I have this, I was talking about this the other day, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I have this, there's two traits I'm very proud of. One, I'm an extremely obsessive person, and I make no apologies for that. And the second thing is I have this ability to make absolutely black and white decisions. And when I decide something is going to happen, it is going to happen, and it doesn't matter what gets in my way. So I knew I was going to leave my job and I was going to write full time, and that's where then the obsession comes in, and I just go and go and go, and yeah, no matter what, even my fear. And like, you might not realize, but I don't have clinical anxiety, but I have definitely been hospitalized for collapsing because I've just had sheer panic attacks and all kinds of stuff. But you know, I can be physically sick before I have to speak at something, but that's not going to stop me. Just wipe the sick away and off you go, darling. You know? Suck it up, princess. I don't know. I don't want to get to my deathbed and look back and go, I'd rather regret the things I've done than the things I haven't done. And, you know, why would you let something like fear, which is so negative and not going to help you in any way, stop you from doing the thing that if you're afraid of, we all know you want to do it. So come on, you know, suck it up, princess, off you go, little bum slap there.
On your way.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I get to. Yeah, good things are on the other side of fear, and adrenaline never hurt anyone, let's be honest. So yeah.
So what are your main resources for self-development? Obviously, like you say, you've done a lot, you've listened to a lot, you've looked into a lot. Have you got any key resources that people who are listening who are looking at going down that avenue and becoming fearless?
Yeah, so I love Jack Canfield's Success Principles. It's a very large, beastly book, but I listened to the audiobook and it's just phenomenal. Also, and I might say her name wrong, but I think it's Tara Moa or Mohia. Anyway, she talks about, and it's called, God, hang on a second, sorry.
Too many books. For people who can't see, which you're on the podcast, you won't be able to see anyway, there is a massive bookshelf behind Sacha, which she is currently hunting.
Yes, it's called Playing Big, sorry. I found it in my 1 million books. And she has this very interesting conversation about fear, and that there's two types of fear. There's Pahad, I think, and Ira, and I forget which way around it is. But one is the type of fear where your life is in danger and you might actually be injured. And the other type of fear, excuse me, is this kind of tingly electric fear, just as you're about to do something amazing. So you get the tingles, the adrenaline. It's a swelling, an expansion type fear, rather than the type of fear before you break a leg or get in a car accident, which is a compressing type fear. It's you shrink into yourself. And she talked about how you have to lean into the expansion fear and obviously try to avoid the other type of fear. But it was fascinating. So I love that book. Also, I sometimes go onto YouTube and type in motivational, session or whatever. And I'll just listen to sports people like, yeah, do it, you can do it. And I'm like hoovering around the house like, yeah,
I'm doing it.
I can fucking do it, and on iTunes and stuff, and I will just listen to people telling me to just fucking do it. All kinds of stuff, and also excuse me, self-help stuff. It sounds weird, but also exercise. So I do martial arts, and this week, for example, so this is also an example of how I have to do the thing that I'm afraid of. God, why do I do this? I literally don't know why I do it. But we have board breaking, and I've never board broken before. And I was so scared of doing this. But I have the arm bruises. There's bruises all up here to prove. So, and I had to do it. And I broke the board with my foot, my fist, and my elbow. And
amazing.
I was shaking, like physically shaking before I did it. but that didn't stop me because I just had to make myself do it. And also meditation really helps.
Okay. What's your meditation routine look like?
At the moment, I just do 10 minutes a day. I don't try and do 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, just because I can commit to 10 minutes a day. And so therefore I commit to that, and that is fine, because meditation is more of an aggregate rather than if you do 30 minutes a day and you don't do 30, then you're not going to find any benefit. No, that's not true. It's the aggregate of meditations. And I use Headspace. Sometimes I don't. I've done, I have my own place I go to in my head, which is just like a lake with waves and mountains and blah. But mostly at the moment, because it's easier, I use Headspace because it's guided and they have rewards, and I like stickers and rewards.
I like seeing the streak counter go up.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Which reminds me, I haven't done it today.
That's why I stopped, because I was on Headspace. I've been meditating a lot, but I joined it properly last year. I think I got to like count 60 something, missed a day, and then got really upset and just like, I know, and it just obviously resets back to 0, which is really frustrating. But do you have a specific like morning routine set up, or is it sort of just throughout the day when you feel like you need certain things, you'll top up the tank?
No. So this is the thing I'm struggling with most at the moment. So I think there's 2 types of routine. There is your day and hours structure of your day routine. Everybody gets up, everybody takes their kids to school, everybody goes to work and has a coffee and does work. Everybody finishes work, they go and get their kid, they feed their kid, they bath their kid, they take their kid to their sports, they put the kid to bed, and then either they watch TV or they read, or they, like me, work again. That's one type of routine. And the other type of routine is more of the, how do you put your work and your self-care and your mindset and productivity in and around your type of work. And I come to the end of 6 months self-employed at the end of this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Do you think I've got a routine? No, I haven't. I've got the first one. I have not pinned down the second one. So if I'm honest, it mostly happens whenever I can squeeze it in. During the week, I tend to do it after my writing, which I think most people think is a bit odd, but it gives me a nice, like a barrier between, okay, I've done my work and now I'm going to do client work. So I do that. And I have an accountability partner, and we send each other our streaks every day. So I better do that today.
Cool. Yeah, I was just reminded you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I find that really interesting, because I hit my 6-month anniversary on the 18th of this month, so we're kind of, I think, around the same place.
Yeah.
And I'm very similarly minded in that, and part of the reason I asked that question is because I'm definitely still trying to find what works for me. And I think this week particularly, I found something that seems to be hitting me quite well and seems to be working, which I can kind of go onto in a second, if you're interested.
I am very interested.
I feel like I almost had a routine down, and then my son started school, and I think your son's around the same age, isn't he? So
he's a year older, so he's in year 1.
Oh, yeah. There you go. But yeah, I went from having him at the childminders for sort of a bit longer during the day to suddenly having to squeeze in the school runs and everything else, which completely shakes up a routine. But at the minute, my get up at the minute is get straight up, go outside, and do a minimum of a 1 kilometer run while listening to like you were talking about the motivational talk playlists. I've got one of those on Spotify, so I'll do that, and 1 kilometer I can commit to. It's easy because there's a small block near mine. It's like takes 5 minutes, and then if I feel good, there's a route where I can carry on and I can sort of extend that, and then I'll come back home, I'll have a quick 5-minute meditation, and then I'll sit and I'll write for an hour or whatever before he wakes up, and it seems to be working all right for me. But I found that when I started trying to create a really strict routine, it was very, very difficult, because the minute 1 minute slips off of something, it accumulates and you feel like you failed. Mm-hmm. Whereas the mentality I'm taking at the minute is start with a run and then just get some stuff done. Like the run and the meditation are the core thing to set me up. And then I've got sort of an hour in which I can get anything from, I don't know, like 2,000 words to 300 words. It doesn't matter, as long as I have something done to get me started for the day before my son wakes up. And then you're at least rolling, you've got that ball rolling. And I can feel the impact that has if I don't get that done. And then if I sleep in and then I'll get Bailey up, and then if I then have to work afterwards, it automatically feels like I've lost 3-4 hours of that day.
So my son is an early bird and I am a night owl. So excuse me, yeah, I have tried the 5 a.m. club and stuff. It doesn't work. My brain does not shut off until about midnight. I have tried the 5 a.m. club for weeks, so I know that my body just won't adjust to it. And all that happened was I ended up in burnout because my body clock wouldn't adjust and I was just getting less sleep. So yeah, the other thing that I'm finding tricky is that I still have freelance work. So I'm not 100% working on just my stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's quite a hard balance. And like you, I don't feel like I found the thing really that's working. I thought I had. And then one thing will get in the way. And all of a sudden, like, I felt like I failed. The thing that's really difficult is it's very easy for lots of stuff for me to pick up lots of stuff. So if the kid's sick or I have to take him to a hospital appointment or whatever, all of a sudden I'm picking those up. And I've hemorrhaged, I would say, at least one working week out of every month that I have had since I left my job, if not a fraction more. And over time, actually, that makes a huge difference, because what happens is, instead of me being able to do my writing, I have to do the freelance stuff because I'm being paid to do that. Mm-hmm. So I just end up not writing as much, or, so yeah, I don't have a solution. I can't even pretend to have a solution here. I don't know what the solution is. I know that it will come in time. But yeah, right now it's still a bit of an experiment, I would say.
So for me, I can switch between being a morning person and being an evening person. And I have done in the past, depending on...
Oh my God.
It depends on what job I've started. So I've had jobs where I've worked early mornings, and then I've sort of had early nights. And then I've had jobs where I've been up all night and I've worked in bars and I've done all that stuff. So I've kind of flipped between the two and I've been okay. But it's quite interesting that you've got that one that does work for you and sticks with you. Is that something, I guess, historical, that have you always worked better later on? Yeah,
my mum's a total night owl as well, and it even from so I was saying I had insomnia as a teenager, and I just have an affinity for night and darkness, and yeah, I love the night because it's quiet and there is a blanket of black with diamonds in it, and I'm fascinated by the stars, and it just has this peaceful. There is even an acknowledgement in one of my books to midnight, because I literally wrote the book at midnight every night for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Amazing.
Excuse me. Yeah. So and I don't know. It's like I get all of this energy at night, and it's frustrating, because what usually happens now is that my brain is tired, and I'm full of energy, which is a weird kind of juxtaposition to be in. Whereas before, when I was in my corporate day job, I didn't have to use my brain as much.
Yes.
So that's when I wrote all my books, because I was full of energy and I still had brain power left. Whereas now I'm doing like go all throughout the day. So even though I wake up, my brain doesn't really have the go power anymore. Like, I quite often have to use CBD oil sometimes, and I've got like a lavendery sleep spray and all kinds of stuff, just because otherwise my brain won't turn off. And that's the only downside of my martial arts, because God forbid I work really hard, which I obviously do, and then I have like these endorphins pumping around my body and I'm just fuck, there is no way I'm going to sleep. So it's horrendous. Like, I love the training and I just can't sleep. I'm like wired afterwards, but yeah.
So what is it about martial arts? Why did you pick martial arts? Was it something you've always done, or is it sort of a hobby you thought you'd pick up as you were?
I've only ever been good at two sports. I swear I was an assassin in my past life, because like the other sport I'm really good at is shooting. Like I can literally shoot like a gnat off a flea's ass from like 800 meters away with just an eye in sight, no scope, no nothing. I've got like my NRA marksman and stuff from when I was younger. But so the other sport I did when I was a teenager was taekwondo, and my teacher left and we had a new teacher, and we didn't really see eye to eye, so I stopped, and it's one of my regrets. And when I went self-employed, I had basically stopped doing sports, which is where all my lovely chins come from. And because basically I sacrificed everything in order to just focus on growing a writing business. So I stopped the sports and I put on the writer's spread. And so I knew I had to do something. And I looked and looked and looked, and I looked at various different sports, and I looked at going to the gym again. And I was just like, taekwondo, there's going to be a whole club there. There's going to be people, which means I will have to speak to humans. And I first found a karate club, and whether it was the universe or what, but basically the days just didn't work out. And then I went back online and searched and found a taekwondo club. And so it feels quite serendipitous that actually I'm finally going to be able to get the belt that I've always wanted for the sport that I've always wanted. So yeah.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Yeah. One thing I did want to ask, and I'm aware that we're coming up to the end of our time together, is I've commented a lot on your Instagram, and we message each other backwards and forwards on Instagram occasionally when we post some serious pictures, some funny pictures, depends what we put up. But one of the things that I do find very, very interesting is your writing process, because you have a little chalkboard thing that you mark a lot of your chapters on, that you bring some back and you write them back on, and it seems to be quite a fluid process. But I just wondered if you could spend a couple of minutes just letting us know what that process looks like, because I'm always interested in how people plan their books, because I'm still trying to find the way that works for me. And you seem to have quite a foresight of what your book is going to bring and what to expect from each chapter.
So I have two completely separate writing processes. So do you want me to give you a whirlwind of both, or just one? Or okay. So for my non-fiction, it's much more structured. So there is a topic. Usually it's a topic that I want to get better at or learn more about, or have a massive rant, which was what my villains book was anyway. And so what will happen is I will do a shit ton of research. I will buy all of the books. I will read all of the books. And I do that quote thingy that I was saying, how I type up all of the notes, and I will section those notes. And then I go to the book and I will chunk out all of the things that I have learnt, and I create a book structure. So for non-fiction, the structure is far more important. That's not what I mean. Non-fiction, you have to take people from basics up to medium levels, up to intermediate, up to complex. And you have to weave. People don't think there's a story arc in non-fiction, but there really is a story arc in non-fiction. And so I find fiction story structure far easier to deal with than I do non-fiction, because you have to know the content so well that you can teach somebody else that content. But when we learn things, they go into our subconscious. So then when you teach, you then have to make them conscious again, because you then have to be able to explain the why behind them. Anyway, long story short, I chunk them all, I get this structure, and then I will flit between the sections and write whatever I think in those sections. And then it is literally, I just take the quotes and the lessons that I've learned and then expand my thoughts around them. And then I'd give them an edit, and it's usually there. Sometimes the structure will have to change and I'll have to reorder the lessons, which is then a ball ache. But mostly I get it right from the start, which is good, because I don't with the fiction. Okay, so with the fiction, oh God, I'm just like, I knew this question was coming. Like, I had a feeling you were going to ask me about this. I was just like, oh God, how do I even explain? So I am very much like you in that I still feel like I'm trying to find the process that works. I have not written two books in the same way. There is kind of a philosophical feeling that's the same. So I can't start a book until I know where it's ending. and I can't start a book until I know where it's beginning. That beginning might not be the beginning by the end of the book, but it's certainly the beginning when I start writing it. I do plot, but I'm looking at a whiteboard in my office now, and there's, I'll put standard story structure. So I'll put, a hook, your inciting event, your first plot point, your realization, midpoint, all of those things. And I might only have a couple of sentences on each of those. So I wouldn't say that I'm an extensive plotter, but I will have some kind of a map which will tell me where to go. I then put that map away and I don't look at it again. And then I write and write and write until I can't write. And then sometimes I'll go back and have a look at it. And what usually happens is I've gone off tangent and I have to restructure the plot. And it's this weird thing because I will actually sit there and rewrite my structure, even though I know damn well I am not going to look at it again. I don't know if it's procrastination or because I'm holding it in my head. But I have to do it, and I have to do it with my hands. I cannot do it on a computer. I'm looking up here now for listeners. I'm looking at a pinboard above my computer, which has Post-it notes. I am notorious for Post-it noting my plots. The other two things about my process are that I have tried writing chronologically, and I have also tried not writing chronologically. And because what happens is scenes come to me more or less complete, I tend to write non-chronologically. So I might start writing the ending and then go back and write something that's 30% in, and then write something that's like 70% in, and then piece it together at the end. And the completion thing, oh wait, no, there's two other things. I'll tell you about that in a second. So I will then, which is this, I've been told off so many times for doing this, but I will then give my chapters, because I more or less edit as I go, I will give my chapters to a critique partner, and they will then give them back. Sometimes I will not look at them until I'm at the end, and sometimes I will look at them. I'm trying to not look at them now, because what happens is I stop and then I go back and edit, and actually that is very disruptive to me. So and obviously because I've said I write all over the place, I have to wait until I have a chunk that I can give her at the beginning. So this time I think I was about 50k in before I could give her 15k at the start.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then I like rewards, and I like being able to see my progress. So I have written little boxes that have like they had 1 to 43 in it. And every time I get a chapter off, I cross it out, just because I like to see the completion. Yeah.
Nice. I can empathize a lot with pretty much all of that, because I'm the same. I'll have some kind of rough plan going in, and then in about, the minute I start, I don't look back. It veers off. It does its own thing. Well, I think that's just the beauty of fiction. Whereas with non-fiction, obviously, you've got a topic that is, I guess, there's sort of the structure built around facts and evidence and everything else. Whereas with fiction, it can just go in absolutely any direction whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think I come up with the best twists when I do allow myself to do that. It's just a bitch, because puzzling it together can be really annoying, and and this is the only thing that I don't like, is that I feel inefficient. So this last book has taken me a year to write, which I don't find acceptable in any way. Before I left my job, I was writing 3 books a year, whilst I was still full-time employed. And okay, yes, I've transitioned. My wife's changed job. I've changed job. We've moved house. Our sons has changed school. But I still think I should have written more than what I have. And when you don't write chronologically and you do have to piece it together, like I have restructured this book 3 times to get it right. But I know, because I'm a rebel, that if I write something that's too structured in terms of a plot outline, there's no fucking way I'm going to follow it. What's the point? So I'm like, I have to come up with something that's loose enough that I have the freedom to move and come up with twists, but also structured enough that I do have a direction. So yeah, absolutely. Well, we are pretty much coming up to the time that we're meant to have, so we are now going to go into the
most feared round of all, which is the quickfire round, which I know you're very much looking forward to. So what I have for new listeners is 10 questions I'm going to throw at Sacha, and she has to back as quickly as she can, or I delete half of the interview. Are you ready, Sacha?
No.
Okay. Well, if you get stuck on any question, you can say pass. It's absolutely fine.
Okay.
People have. What was the last movie you watched?
I can tell you that was The Addams Family because we went today.
Unicorns or dragons?
Uni gone?
Salt or pepper?
Oh, salt. Wait, no, pepper. Oh, God. Salt.
Let's go with your first answer.
Sorry.
If all of your work was burned in a fire and you could save just one book of yours, what would it be?
My heart would say Keepers because it was the first fiction book I wrote. My head would say Villains because it earns the most.
How many pets do you own?
None.
What's your favourite book of all time?
There is no possible way I can answer that at all ever. I have about 800 favourite books. Delirium. Okay, Delirium by Lauren Oliver. Only because I learnt the most from it in terms of descriptive prose. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favourite author or story or whatever, but it's a favourite just because of what I took from it.
What's the farthest you've walked in a day?
I trekked up to Mount Everest Base Camp and I walked a lot of miles on some of those days. I couldn't possibly tell you. Also, I've done my Gold D&V, so
nice.
I don't know. We did 50 miles on that one, and the Everest trip was about 100 kilometers, I think, or 100 miles. I can't remember. It was a long way.
Impressive. I was thinking probably 22,000 steps, but no, that helps. Tell us one thing about yourself that no one knows that is weird.
I have trypophilia. So trypophilia is a fear of. This is so embarrassing. Right, trypophilia is a fear of lots of really small dots in
I've heard of it.
close proximity to each other. And I'll tell you when I developed it. I had scarlet fever as a kid, and I hallucinated for 3 days straight. And my fear, I had 2 fears. Beauty and the Beast was another one that came out of it. Don't ask me why. And trypophilia was the other one.
Okay, we might jump back to that in a second. What's your favourite time of year?
It's a toss-up between autumn and summer. I'm a sun baby, but I like the colours of autumn.
Do you have a catchphrase?
Suck it up, princess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool, that's 10 questions.
Yay!
Boom. Just a question going back to the trypophilia.
Yeah.
Is pointillism close enough dots that it upsets you?
If I stood close to pointillism, it probably would be a problem. But if you stand far away, then it's the image. It's more. Oh God, I've got images in my head now. So thank you for that.
We don't have to dig deep. I do have one more question, which is where can our listeners find out everything about you and what you're working on?
So my website is www.sachablack.co.uk, and that is Sacha with a C, so SACHA. I am most prolific on Instagram in terms of social media, and my handle is @SachaBlackAuthor. And I do have Twitter, which I think is Sacha_Black, and Facebook. You can either search 13 Steps to Evil or Sacha Black, and you can find me there. And my podcast is the Rebel Author Podcast.
Beautiful, lovely. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Sacha. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I've absolutely loved it. And I was shitting myself before this because there were no questions. So I hope that I have given listeners something useful rather than waffle.
I'm sure there's loads, yeah. And that kind of proves my point about how professional you are compared to me. But that's what I like. I like this can go everywhere, and it's gone in a lot of places today, which it wouldn't have gone if it was scripted. And it was just, I've had a blast. So thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
No worries. And thank you everyone for listening, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Great Writers Share podcast. Next week, I'll be joined by genre-hopping fiction and non-fiction author John Cronshaw. Don't forget you can get early access to every episode of the Great Writers Share podcast and the chance to ask upcoming guests any of your questions just by becoming a patron of the show. All you need to do is visit www.patreon.com/Great Writers Share and support the show for as little as $1 a month. One more time, that's www.patreon.com/Great Writers Share. Until next time.